All right, welcome to video 2 in the series called The Gospel in the Stars. This is the second video in a series of 4, and if you didn't get the first introductory video, I highly encourage you to go back and watch that first, because it will be far more rich for you and you'll understand a lot more about what I'm referring to when I say the Decan constellations and some of the other references that I make here. But in this video, we're going to be talking about the first 4 constellations in the zodiac, and I'll show you them here. We're going to be talking about Virgo, then we're going to go on to Libra, and to Scorpio, and to Sagittarius in this video. And we'll also be talking about some of the Decan constellations, such as, I think his name is Ophiuchus, is that how you say it? We're going to be talking about the Corona Borealis, the Coma, and I just want you to get a very clear image of how these things look together and how they're operating. So along the ecliptic, the path of the sun, this red line, our sentence, we're going to call it the grand sentence, starts with Virgo and it moves this direction. And you'll see that it finally ends up, after all 12, with Leo the lion. And when you see these in this order, rather than as it's typically looked at now, I believe it starts with Aries the ram in common modern day astrology. The original Babylonian and ancient Egyptians started the process off with Virgo, the Virgin, and that makes this story that we're looking at make so much more sense when you see it this way, and that's the way it originally was set up. Now, we're going to dive right in looking at Virgo. These 4 constellations in their essence have to do with the nature and the character of the seed of the woman, the Messiah that was promised to Adam and Eve, that would come and rescue them after they'd fallen and they lost their paradise home. And you'll remember that the promise was given to Eve that there would come a seed that would crush the head of the serpent, and that in the process he would suffer, he would be wounded in the heel, but he at last would be victorious. So this is the story that we see in the stars. You'll see here's another rendition of Virgo. She has this seeds in her hand. That star, that's the very bright star here, is Spica, and it was the name and the meaning of that star was the, I'm looking at the name here, it meant the seed. And it is the same word that's used in Genesis when it's talking about the seed of the woman. It's also a very bright star. I'll show you what it looks like in the sky tonight. It's this one here. This is the sun, so that doesn't count because it keeps moving. But this is a very bright star here, and it's known as the bright one, the one that would come, the hero that would come, the seed of the woman that would crush the head of the serpent. And then up here, you'll notice there, it looks like a lock of a woman's hair tied with a ribbon. This, in Greco-Roman times, took on this name by obviously a wonderful man who loved his wife very much, and apparently the story goes she cut her hair and he said, "Honey, your hair is so beautiful and I love you so much. Those stars up there are your hair." And he renamed this constellation from Coma to Coma Berenice, which was her name, Berenice. But in the original, I want to draw your attention to this. It looked like this. It's a woman seated on a throne with a little baby. Now, astonishingly, in the original Chaldean, which is the ancient early Babylonians, the Egyptians and the Persians and others all taught that this Decan constellation that was right next to Virgo was a pure virgin. They all taught this. It was a pure virgin that was nourishing her infant son. And the baby's name was the desired one, the one that was longed for. They gave him the name Aihisu, Shesnu, Aiza, and then later in Greek, he was interpreted to be the Christ. So this is not just any little baby on a mother's knee. She's a virgin, and this is the anointed, the Christ that was to come to rescue. Now, this is a very interesting and important point to notice this, because you've probably seen pictures in ancient Egypt of Hathor holding Isis, the baby, and then later on in Greco-Roman times there were other virgin mothers holding babies. And then there's a lot of critique I've seen online of people saying, see, Christianity's just copying, they just baptized the idols to make it Mary holding baby Jesus. Well, that part is true. God was not for idols. But I believe all of these traditions came from this original source, that in these stars was promised this Christ child. You'll see even in Isaiah, it says, the Lord himself will give you a sign. This is the same exact Hebrew word that is used in Genesis 1 when it says, I gave you the sun, moon, and stars to be signs, to give you an omen or evidence or a mark or a miracle in the sky. So he gave them a sign of a virgin who would bear a son, and his name would be called Emmanuel. So very interesting analogies here. Additionally, I'm not going to go into it in great detail because it's its own study, amazing jaw-dropping study in other places. But the wise men, they are believed to have been Zoroastrian Persian priests that were of the same kind of priesthood that you would find in ancient Israel, among the Levites. They believed in a single creator God who was the creator of the heaven and earth. They believed that all other gods were false and that they worshipped only the creator. Very interesting, neat group of people, but it's believed that those people were the ones that were watching the skies, that had these same constellations all along, and when they saw these specific, very rare, very unusual pairings of, we call them conjunctions, of things that were happening with the sun, moon, and planets within the constellation Virgo, as well as within the constellation Leo, which is the king constellation. So the king and the virgin combined right next to each other. They saw very unusual things happening in these, and that is what made them, at the exact right time, board their camels, invest the time, the money, and the energy to cross that desert, thousands of miles. Must have taken them months to do that, and at the exact right moment came to where Jesus was and found him there. So if that's not evidence for the fact that it's not bad to look at the stars, I don't know what it is. That God is indeed sending messages to the people that care to watch through the stars, through the sun and moon and stars. Now, that doesn't mean that he wants us to ignore what he has said and worship the stars and look at the stars rather than to his word for advice and guidance. But certainly it does indicate that he has been, and he will continue, he says, until the day of the Lord, until his coming, to use the heavens to talk to us. So let's go to the next constellation. I should have just shown you that. We'll move right along from Virgo, and we're going to go here to Libra, the scales. Now this I find to be one of the most interesting, compelling things, because again, if you turn off our pictures, can you see anything out of these stars? And yet there they are, and there is where parents and children and parents and children told their children, look honey, that up there, those stars, that is a balance scale. And there was something that compelled people to keep the traditions going decade after decade after generation after generation. So let's talk about what that might have been. You'll remember we were talking about the war in heaven with Lucifer and his angels, the dragon that won a third of the stars over, a third of the angels, and how that transferred to Earth. It spilled over into our planet and with Adam and Eve, and their loss of the garden home that they had had until such a time as this conflict could be resolved. Well, a conflict of this nature, where God himself and his character is being attacked, and he is being set up as someone who lies and who is not fair and who really is serving his own best interest, not his children's best interest. These are charges that have to be answered. You can't just sweep them under the rug, otherwise they just fester, right? And it goes to show, well, maybe Satan was right. So he has to allow, God has to allow for there to be some sort of judgment scales where evidence is put on one side, on God's side, and evidence is put on Satan's side. And then evidence is put on God's side, and evidence is put on Satan's side. And a little here, a little there, a little here, a little there, until it becomes clearer and clearer and clearer who is the real winner, who is the one that is really telling the truth, and who is the one who is a liar. And it's not always easy right from the beginning to see. That's why people are deceived. So in Genesis 3, at that tree, at the knowledge of good and evil, Eve and the serpent are having a conversation. She's saying, no, I can't eat that fruit because God said it's not good for me. He said it's the day I eat it, I will die. And he says, he's lying to you. You're not going to die. You're not going to die. He just knows that you're going to be as smart as he is. And he doesn't want you to be that smart. Well, immediately that places Eve in a position of, is he telling the truth? She'd never really encountered anybody that had lied before. And so she naively believes him and goes ahead and disobeys God and distrusts what God said to protect her. And you have here the evidence having to be shaken out now on the scales. Who's telling the truth and who is not? And so in these stars, remember there's words in the stars. We had the star that was the seed here, the star that is the branch. I forgot to tell you about the branch. Anyway, the stars here in Libra, in these scales, are here on this page. Zubin al-Ganubi. Remember, these are the Arabian translations of the ancient Babylonian names for the constellations. One means that the price is deficient. It's not enough. Zubin al-Shamali, then there's a price which covers that which was deficient. And al-Gubi, just like you would put things on a scale, there's heaped up high. There's evidence on both sides being heaped up high. And then Zubin Akrabi, to me this one is the most important to tell the nature of this scale. It's not just about trading money and merchandising. It says it's the price of the conflict, the price of the war is being put on these scales. So it's talking about this long drawn out hearing where evidence for good or evil is put on until the nature of Satan's rebellion and the nature of sin becomes obvious, because in many ways sin looks very fun and it looks very good and it looks like it's the thing that makes us happy, but in the end it's also the thing that makes us very, very unhappy and very, very sad. So the evidence has to be piled up and piled up. And remember, we talked about the deacons that are on both sides of a constellation. The constellations in the zodiac are along the ecliptic, but then on the sides there are deacon constellations. So this one I find very interesting. Below it is the Southern Cross. The Southern Cross used to be visible up until the time of Christ even in the Northern Hemisphere. Since then the Earth has wobbled a bit and it's just dipped below the horizon, so we can't see it anymore. But for most of the world's history, and certainly still in the Southern Hemisphere, the Southern Cross is one of the most prominent, brightest, clearest constellations that there are. It's a clear cross in the sky. And then above the Libra is the Northern Crown. So we have the Southern Cross and the Northern Crown, the Corona Borealis. And you'll remember when we were talking in the first video about the heavens declare the glory of God. Now we remember that you can't get glory if you're giving it to yourself. You can't get love if you're demanding it or giving it to yourself. You can only invite it. You can only attract it. And it's the same with God getting glory from his people or from anybody in the universe. You can't have that until it's clarity on these scales that you are actually the right one, that you're the one that's exonerated and you're the one that's truly innocent and that has been innocent all along. And one of the evidences that was piled up high, just like the star says, that things were piled up on these scales, was that God himself, God himself came down from heaven through a virgin as a baby to come and live, to be wounded, deeply wounded, and pay the penalty so that Adam and Eve and all their children could be restored to what they had lost. And in that conflict itself, Satan's character became so clear and Christ's character became so clear that the balances were tipped, and in his favor it became very clear that Christ, what lengths he was willing to go to love us and to bring us back, and to what lengths Satan was willing to go to keep that from happening. All right, so in the Bible it talks about the day when every knee will bow and the crown will be awarded to the clear winner. It's not just taken by God. It's not just commanded. It is won. And I love that about him. All right, moving on to the next grouping of constellations. And it's very important to remember that these constellations are not islands to themselves. They are surrounded by others that are interacting with each one of them. And this one especially, it bears witness to that. I love this constellation grouping. It says so much about the character of God. So, first off, here we have this scorpion. All right, and all of us know what scorpions are like. I've never been stung by one, but I have family and friends that have. And they can be deadly. They're not necessarily deadly where I live, but in other parts of the world, certainly in the Middle East, they can inflict a wound in the same way that a snake can, that can be deadly. So, the stars, again, are named in this constellation. Al-Akrab means wounding, conflict, or war. So it's very interesting. We're not just talking about a bug here. We're talking about a war that's going on and the nature of the one who started this war. Now, very interestingly, this yellow one here is Antares, and it's the heart and the head of the scorpion, and in that is named wounding, cutting, and tearing. And you'll remember when Jesus was talking about Satan, he said he was a murderer and a liar from the beginning. He was always, there was nothing in his heart that was sympathetic toward things. He wanted to win, and he was willing to do anything to gain that power. Al-Shalahi is the next one, and it means the raised. So it's up in the tail here. It's clear that it's not just a docile little creature, it's ready to sting. And then al-lasa, that's up here at the stinger. It means the sting of the poisonous one, the poison that can kill you. Okay, and then very interestingly, one of the stars is called Sargas, and in the books that I had, it said it's not definable what that means anymore. We lost the actual wording, but it's of Sumerian origin. Now, Sumeria is the very first culture in the Fertile Crescent in Mesopotamia there that we have any records of after the flood and the Tower of Babel era. So it's very interesting. I can't prove this, but Sargas sounds extremely close to Sargon, right? There's some overlying something there. Sargon of Akkad is believed to have been the king, who is the biblical version of Nimrod. And there's a whole other study I could do on Nimrod that is just groundbreaking and amazing. But if you do any study on him at all, you'll find there was 3 different kings that named themselves Sargon. They were not given that name at birth, and the name happened to all of them. They gave them all their own. They all named themselves this after they murdered the former ruling king. They took over his country by killing him, and then they named themselves Sargon, and that name meant I'm the real king, I'm the legitimate ruler. And I find that very interesting that that name Sargas is in this little scorpion here, because it is very much the nature of Sargon, of killing someone so that you can rule and you be the legitimate ruler, and doing it by bloodshed and by violence. That is exactly in harmony and exactly aligned with the character of the nature of Lucifer, who wanted the throne of God at any cost. Didn't matter who was in the way. So to me, this sign really shows us in one way. There's multiple ways in which it will be revealed through the zodiac, but one way in which God shows us what the nature of Satan and the enemy of man is actually like. He's not just fighting in self-defense. He's on offense, and he is malicious, and his murders are premeditated. Now, fascinatingly enough and wonderfully enough, over here is one of the deacons, and you'll see him. Let me show him to you here. I don't believe this is the proper rendition of him, but I want to show you something. So here's Scorpio along the line, and right here is Ophiuchus, or I'll get the exact wording in just a second, but he's known as the serpent holder or the serpent bearer, meaning that his strength, he's a strong man, is equal to the serpent's strength. And look at what he's keeping him from doing. He's keeping the snake away from ruling the universe, from getting that crown. Now, interestingly enough, you can't see it in this because they didn't really draw him right, according to the old charts. If you go to the older charts, you'll see it here. Here's the scorpion under his foot, and he's crushing its head with his heel. He's also in line to where the stinger can hit his heel, right here. All right. I love that because to me, this is a symbol of Christ, the nature of what Christ came to do. He was keeping Satan from taking rule and plunging the universe into total chaos and sorrow and destruction. And so as he's holding him, he's crushing the scorpion, and he's being attacked in the heel by that scorpion. Now, up here, let me show you with this again. Above Ophiuchus, another deacon, is Hercules. Let me turn him around so you can see him better. Hercules is the strong man. If you go back and look at any of the ancient stories about him, he is the strong man that fights all these different horrible creatures that all in some way or another represent the chaos and the evil and the destruction that has come to man as a result of Satan. Oops. There we go here. So in this case, he's battling the seven-headed serpent. And in the story, every time he cuts off one of the serpent's heads as he's trying to attack him, it grows another one, so he has to get a brand of fire and kind of lop off a head and sear it so it can't grow anymore. But Hercules is kneeling because his heel has been wounded in the battle. In the end, he wins, but it's quite the conflict and it's quite the war. And in these stars, in these original stories that the pagan stories have really taken off of and copied and twisted a bit, you can still see the story that is being presented about the nature of the character of Christ, the Messiah, and what he was doing for us, for his people, in his ministry and in his life. He came to eradicate Satan's claim on any title through the judgment and through what he did for us on the cross. All right, last, oh, I forgot to tell you, there's a really cool story. Ooh, here we go. So this is a very cool story. This is baby Hercules, again, a symbol of the Christ, and the stories have been presented. Just as Herod attempted to kill baby Jesus when he was born, the story of Hercules is that his stepmother, who was jealous of his rulership and wanted to reign in his stead, very similar in nature to Satan, put a snake in his crib to kill him when he was a baby. But he was so strong that he just killed the snake. And in the same way, Satan attempted, through jealousy and through Herod's jealousy, to try to kill Jesus in his infancy, but he could not. So very interesting way that this whole picture together is working to tell us about the ministry of Christ. Now in this next one, the story is wrapped up. So the first is talking about the toiling deliverer, the one that is being beaten and wounded in his saving of us. And now he comes back as the conqueror in this one. As the judgment is finalized, it is over, and he's riding on to conquer Satan and finish him off. So I love this one very much. When I first saw this, let me go show you here. If we follow the line again, you'll see the archer here, the Sagittarius. Sagitta is a word that means arrow. So a Sagittarius is the bearer of that arrow, the archer. And let's go back here. You'll find that he's half man, half horse. And he's fully man, but he's fully horse. He's one and the other. He's not one or the other. And so there's a dual nature going on here, in the same way that there's a dual nature with Christ, the God-man, the one that was born of a virgin. He's not a man. He's a God, but he's also a man. He has been tempted in all ways as we are. And I find it very interesting that he is shooting an arrow at a target, because that says a lot about what his character is. If you know much about Hebrew, you'll know that the Hebrew word for sin it means literally to miss the bullseye, to miss the arrow, the mark, and as a result of that missing, to suffer loss. So here is the man who doesn't miss. He's got a perfect aim, and it represents that he has a perfect character. He has never sinned. He is sinless, and thus he is able to be our sacrifice, our Savior. The other thing I love about this one, I just almost welled up with tears as I was learning about it, because it was, to me, it's so important for me that God is not just God, but that he's not just real, and he's not just the ruler and the king, but he's also personal. He knows my name. He knows how many hairs are on my head. He knows all the things that I go through. And he's personal, and he cares about me, and he's loving. And that's what this one represents to me. That while he's God, and he has the power and the righteousness to reconcile me to God in a way that no human ever could, at the same time, he understands me at the deepest level. He's touched by my suffering, and by all the suffering that all men and women and children experience in the world. And he is here at last, having won the victory on the cross and suffered through that loss. He's kept the snake from getting to that crown. And now, as this centaur, he's ready to finish the job. So before we saw him as the Alpha, the creator, the one who made the stars, and now we're seeing him as the Omega, the finisher of this great conflict. And what's very interesting is that in Greek, this centaur, this man horse, is called Chiron, and it means the executor, the one that is handing out the judgment. And Jesus talks himself about how the Father has committed the judgment to him, that there's nobody else that can do it. And in Revelation, it talks about how nobody else was worthy to open these scrolls and do this judgment except for the Lamb that was slain. And here we have this person who has done that for us, who's the only one that could have done that for us. And he's no longer here the suffering toiler, but he's the crowned righteous administrator of justice. The judgment has been set. The scales have tipped. We know whose character is who, and this one has been shown in the judgment to have the highest integrity. And he's also got, because he is God, he's got the strongest military force. So in this, he's the finisher. And here's the stars, and their actual words there in the stars are a little bit boring in this one, but they're very important. So there's the knee, there's the heel tendon, there's the arrowhead, there's the bow. But what those things tell us is that that archer's bow is aimed straight at the heart of that merciless, on offense, pain-inflicting scorpion, and his job now is to stop him in his tracks and keep him from doing any further harm. And I'm just like, get him! Go get him! It makes me very, very excited. So I just wanted to show you something from Revelation, that when I read this in conjunction with knowing now about the Sagittarius, that didn't make sense to me before, but now that I do, these just came alive. So it says, I saw, this is John the Revelator saying, I saw, and behold, a white horse, and he that sat on him had a bow. There it is. And a crown was given to him. So he's won the crown that he was keeping the devil from getting, and he went forth conquering and to conquer. So he's winning. And I think, you know, if I were the devil and these things were so clearly laid out to me and to everybody in the zodiac that I was going to meet my demise, I would do everything in my power to mess that up, wouldn't you? To turn it into idolatry and to keep people from understanding the story that God had put there. Also in Revelation 19, verse 11, this is another reference to this. It says, I saw heaven open, and behold, a white horse, and he that sat on him was called Faithful and True, and in righteousness, not out of selfishness, but in righteousness, he does judge and make war. His eyes were as a flame of fire, and on his head were many crowns, and he had a name written that no man knew but he himself. I think that means, you know, Jesus was alone in the universe, just unique. Nobody else was God and man in the way that Jesus is. And he was clothed with a vesture dipped in blood, and his name is called the Word of God. And he has on his vesture and on his thigh a name written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. This is the victory cry. This is the finalization of the end of all sin and suffering. I love this one. And then in the deacons, I love this too, is the lyra, the harp, the final triumphant song of joy, the new song that we sing when the whole thing is over. Can't wait to sing that. Anyway, those are the 4 that we're going to deal with in this video. The next video, oh, you know what? I forgot. I have to talk about the other 2 deacons here before we move on. I'm sorry, this is getting a little long, but this is profound. So up in the sky is the pole star. This is how all the stars are going around the center, and the very center is the pole. So very interestingly enough, before the time of Christ, at the beginning of creation, we can backtrack and we can find out how the stars have moved and how the wobbling of the earth has moved things. So at the very beginning of time, when Adam and Eve fell, this dragon, the Draco, was at the pole. It was the center of our star's constellation. And now, since Christ has won, it is off the center and it is over on the side. I love that. So, in Revelation 12, it says, and I heard a loud voice saying in heaven, now is come salvation and strength and the power and the kingdom of our God and the power of his Christ. For the accuser of our brethren is cast down, which accused them before our God day and night. And the constellation stars that are in this serpent dragon, the first one is Althubin. It means the serpent or the dragon, and that's the one that was the pole star in the ancient Egyptian zodiacs around 2700 BC, which is right about the time, right after the flood, right about the time of the Tower of Babel, right around the same period. So it's perfect timing. Then up here in the head, there's a star that's called the head of the serpent. But check this one out. Al-Wa'id is one of these stars. It means who is to be destroyed. If it was just a picture of a dragon, why would that be one of the names of the stars? He is to be destroyed. And then El Tanin means the great serpent. So it's very clear when Revelation's talking about this, the dragon, it's all talking about the story that's in the stars. Now, interesting also, this is one of the other deacons. This is an altar called Ara, and it's connected with the Hebrew word Aram, and that means curse or utter destruction. And another star in this one is Al-Magamra, which means the completing, the finishing, and making an end of. So this is not a sacrificial altar. This is the lake of fire in which the dragon is going to be thrown into at the end, when Jesus comes as this archer who comes to make war and finish what he began. I'm looking forward to that day. It'll be magnificent. I'll see you in the next video.